Welcome in. I'm so glad you made us part of your day. I'm Tony Moore, expert food and beverage headhunter, semi-professional podcaster, and I interview the best heads in business to bring you all the important trends shaping the $6 trillion food and beverage industry. My totally awesome brands featured here take us deep into the world of sustainability and the plant-based food movement, the up-and-coming CBD and good-for-you categories. How about the purpose and mission-based companies striving to make real change in our world? They're here too. The latest in food tech. You want to learn how to build a brand, maybe scale a brand? I've got you covered. Don't forget to subscribe and follow me on LinkedIn. Stay tuned. 2022 has got so many opportunities on the horizon. I've talked to so many new brand startups, big plans. And I got to tell you, I think this is one of the best times to start a brand, particularly a food and beverage brand, because the pandemic has really turned the whole selling aspect really on its ear. What do I mean by that? Well, you don't have to hit the road the way you used to. Now you can have meetings over the phone, over Zoom, category managers, brand managers. They are now kind of dealing with this new world of selling. It's even easier now to launch a brand. And that is what we're going to be talking about today. Specifically, how to launch an alcoholic beverage and why that's much more difficult than a normal beverage brand. Now, I have a special guest host today. Kevin, I'm really excited to introduce you to my audience and to our listeners. Kevin Scott, he is a Coca-Cola executive of more than 30 years. He has a background in sales, marketing, and general management. He led a team generating over $1 billion in annual gross profit. I want you to think about that. Profit. We're not talking top line. And was instrumental in the acquisition of some brands that we all know, Vitamin Water, Smart Water. He played a big part in that. Kevin works with me on many projects. For those of you who are starting a brand, he's really a hired gun at this point. Okay, he's a fractional consultant for CPG brands, and he's going to join me this year on some special occasions. And today we have just that special occasion. John Behling is with us today. I want to give you a quick overview of his background. He was the director of marketing at Coke, later was the EVP for House of Blues Entertainment, then the chief marketing officer for Clearly Canadian, which is the sparkling water. And currently he is the president of JuJu Labs, which is a wine and beer brand. And they create this, what they call this science of deliciousness. I love it when they try to describe these flavors and how it's engineered. And they have just launched a new wine product that we want to talk about today. It's called Mr. Mardi Gras Wine. So Kevin, what am I missing with John? I think you've worked with him. You have some knowledge of John.
Yeah, Tony. First of all, thanks for the intro. And what you talked about, John, it goes even beyond that. And here's where I'm excited. Whether you're listening for the first time and you have experience in CPG beverages, or if you're an expert or you're in between or just considering maybe going down that path, we're going to be very, very lucky to hear John speak just because of the different companies he's had, the different leadership roles he's had, the wealth of knowledge. So if you're listening for the first time, I would really suggest you may want to take some notes because John is a wealth of information. And you talked about the different companies he's come from. And so he's very, very diverse in what he's seen, what he's experienced, challenges, and we'll uncover that as we speak to him over the next 30 minutes or so. So I'm looking forward to it. And I think at this point, John, it'd be great if you just give us the background of JuJu and where you are, how this evolved, and what it's taken you to finally get this product, to the shelf.
Oh, I appreciate it, guys. Good morning. Well, it goes back even a little further than that. A mutual friend of the chairman and I contacted me, wanted to know about what I thought about this product. And Mr. Mardi Gras Wines, it's a fruit-based wine that is actually a little carbonated, and I say a little carbonated, in a can. And he had contacted me. I said, well, I love the name, love the concept. And I said, first I'd like to try it, because I'm a firm believer. And if I'm going to represent a product, and I'm not saying my palate is the end all be all palate, but I think I've got a pretty diverse palate in terms of what I think tastes good and what maybe the consumer will like. But I also know I've tasted a lot of stuff that I went, oh my gosh, this is awful. But anyway, so they sent me, it's unfortunate, it's true.
You have to pass the taste test. I mean, if you can't get past the taste test, like Mr. Wonderful would say, take it behind the barn and shoot it.
Well, I think we can all go into a store, maybe we've tried something, and you kind of scratch your head and go, wow, how did this even make the shelf? But anyway, they sent me some samples. I thought it was actually really pretty good. And if you don't know much about the wine in a can category, it's actually pretty new, and there's no real runaway leader. I used to work at Red Bull before my days at Coca-Cola, and we basically started the energy drink category, and now there's hundreds and hundreds of energy drinks out there. But in the canned wine category, there's really no leader. And, the wine purists will say, wine shouldn't be in a can. But there's this younger generation that we all know wants convenience. They're on the go. And Tony, you said, we've created the science of deliciousness, and we've also got a couple internal catchphrases. We say we're for hobs, which is short for hobbyists, not snobs. And so we're definitely not the group that grabs a glass and, swirls it and smells it and lets the bouquet, get some oxygen in there. But we're for the everyday fun partier kind of person that wants to enjoy a good tasting wine.
I love the idea that you're approaching it with a can and that you're adding carbonation to it, which is kind of reverse of what typically happens with wine. And I know this is an audio podcast, but we'll have to get some really cool pictures of your cans up, because I've seen them, and you think Mardi Gras. I mean, this can literally just screams, this is fun. This is Mardi Gras. So a lot of these brands that come on here have some kind of a mission, or there's a goal, some kind of aspirational goal. What's are there any underlying, themes that you're looking for here with this brand?
Yeah, let me kind of explain the quick story. So the way the product started is our chairman Sanjeev was friends with a gentleman by the name of Blaine Kern, who just passed away last year at about, I think, 93 years old. But the real story behind this is Blaine surname, if you will, was Mr. Mardi Gras. I mean, he if you Google him, that's the first thing that'll come up. And Blaine's company, Mardi Gras World, is the company that makes all the floats for Mardi Gras and floats for other parades. And he basically said Mardi Gras should be for everybody, because a long, long time ago, it was frankly for the rich elitists. And now it's just a celebration for all of us. And so that's how he kind of was anointed by the mayor at the time as Mr. Mardi Gras. He was all about fun and partying and enjoying the city of New Orleans. Well, our chairman was doing some business with Blaine on another total capacity. And he said, when I come down for this meeting, I want to bring some wines that I've made in my basement. Because like a lot of entrepreneurs and people, whether you're brewing, home beer in your basement, and when you're out in Northern California area, there's a lot of people that make homemade wine in their basement. So we brought some bottles of wine to him, and Blaine said, I love this product. It tastes fantastic. We need to put the Mardi Gras name on it. Well, fast forward, Blaine got a little ill. The project went on hold. And after he passed away, the conversation was brought up back again with his Holly Kern, his widowed wife. And they said, let's do this. And then that's how really the project started again. And so, Tony, you mentioned the fact of carbonation. So if people that don't know the wine industry, when you naturally ferment wine, it gets carbonated. It's just a natural, scientific process, chemistry process that happens. Bottled wines, they actually extract that carbonation. We actually keep the carbonation in and add a little more, not as much as like a cola would be, but just enough pop. So when you pour it in a glass, you get a little bit of fizz.
Yeah, it sounds kind of fun. And I think when you do pop a top on a can, we've all kind of been conditioned to kind of want to hear that pop of that fizz. If it's not there, you might think, hey, it's flat, right? I don't know if that goes into your mind about that, but I think that's really cool. Well, you said there's really not much of there's not a leader in the wine in the can category. Can you tell us a little bit more just about this category, just what the trends are happening right now in this niche, and specifically the market that you're targeting?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head a little bit. It's a market that's rising. There's no question. People are looking for convenience. The CPG and beverage world, in a weird way, COVID's actually helped our business. And I say that because I think we all went to a grocery store the past couple of years, and the fear that we'd run out of toilet paper, and paper towel was very evident. But as much as, unfortunately, the on-premise business and bars and restaurants shutting down, the off-premise business of grocery stores really accelerated. So it grew the spirits and beverage or adult beverage, area to grow exponentially. And now that things are as normal as I say we can be at this point, the wine category is actually a category that has just really erupted. And so, again, back to that convenience and the whole notion of, staying at home with friends and being kind of in your social circle, near to home, the canned wine category is starting to grow. And what a lot of people don't equate to it, it's kind of interesting. You think of, let's say I went to get a 6-pack of beer, and everybody thinks I've got a 6-pack of beer. Well, 2 12-ounce cans is the same as 1 bottle of wine. So it's like 2 equals 1 if you just kind of correlate some things together. And most people don't comprehend that. So 2 cans of our wine or 2 cans of any canned wine is actually 1 bottle of wine.
Wow, that's a lot. And that sounds like a pretty good value too. Well, I want us to start transitioning into the meat of why you're here, because I understand in talking to you and Kevin that it's, there are some challenges, exponentially, over just launching a normal non-alcoholic brand. What is it that makes this different, better, special?
Well, there's a few things. And the first thing is we're actually launching in New Orleans, which for the name of the brand makes all the sense in the world. It's New Orleans is not, or the state of Louisiana is not your typical market that you launch in. But because of who we are, what our name was, the story behind Blaine Kern, it only makes sense to launch in New Orleans. The second market, again, probably not necessarily top of mind, is actually St. Louis, Missouri. Unbeknownst to even myself, St. Louis, claims to have the second largest Mardi Gras celebration in the entire country. So those are our 2 markets that we're launching. We just signed, 2 distributors, and we can get into that in a bit. 2 distributors in those markets, and they're taking their first delivery. I've been guaranteed just in the media by the mayor of New Orleans saying Mardi Gras will happen this year. After last year it was canceled because of what was going on with COVID, but Mardi Gras is happening this year. So back to the question of why is it different? There is, one or 2 other sparkling, carbonated wines that are out there, but they're honestly pretty rare. And so, that's our one point of differentiation. Secondly is we don't take ourselves too seriously. We're definitely not a snobby kind of wine. We're a fun party wine. And so we're taking the stance of just kind of enjoy everyday life execution. And then at the end, right now, our first 2 blends are a strawberry, both a white and red, and a blueberry white and red. I can tell you that we already have 2 other fruit flavors down the pipeline of innovation. So you name your fruit, we're going to make it. And so right now we're the only one out there that has these other types of flavors. They don't exist.
That's pretty interesting, John. You know what I'd really like to get from you, and I think the listeners would too. This didn't take 2 to 3 weeks to birth the idea, go through the process, and get it to market. What are some of the challenges that you faced when you finally took on this project?
Well, right off the bat is, I said originally the first iterations actually were made in our chairman Sanjeev's basement. But for legalities of manufacturing in the adult beverage industry, you get to a certain gallon and you have to get a license. And there's all sorts of different licenses versus the non-alcoholic world. So that's the first challenge, is finding a co-packer and going through all those government licensing executions. So in terms of a co-packer, in the non-alcoholic world, you can find all sorts of co-packers to blend and make your product. It's literally sometimes like making a recipe on a stove. This is definitely a bit more of an art form. And so you have to get the right, ratio of the fruit wines that we create, the right ratio of the blended wines we create to come up with that flavor, then of course mark that. And so the co-packer and partner that we have, that was one hurdle. And then once we actually had, a batch, then you go through the legal process. And, as funny as it sounds, is you have to go all the way back to Prohibition. When Prohibition was repealed, you have the federal government, then each state has their own laws. So me getting approval in Louisiana was one thing, then to get approval in Missouri is another thing. And if I go to another state, there's this whole process, and it can take 30 days. It can take 6 months. And, all of a sudden you've got product ready, but you can't even go to that state because you're waiting on documentation.
Right. Yeah. It's just, it's challenges that a lot of people just aren't aware of. And so I'm really curious, if you think about getting your product to the shelf, you've basically got to get a distributor. So take us through the process of what you went through and how you finally ended up with the current distributor you're using.
There's actually two things. So the other good thing that came out of COVID, actually, because, consumers were hurting. There were some of them were afraid to go to grocery stores. So I was talking about Prohibition, how those laws really haven't changed. The government actually changed some of those laws, and you can actually go to direct to consumer in, I think it's 36 states now for wine. So they've loosened up on those laws or changed those laws. So you can go to our website and order online. But again, I have to be legal to sell in those states. But your question about the distributor is, in a 3-tiered selling system, you have to get through 2 hurdles. And it doesn't matter if you're alcoholic or non-alcoholic. If you choose to go with a distributor, you have to sell into that distributor. So all these things that we're talking about flavor and uniqueness and why our brand versus their brand, etc., you have to convince that distributor to take on your product. And the fundamental difference between alcohol and non-alcoholic is, by law, you have to use a distributor to go into those retail locations. So it does have to go through, that wholesale versus a direct wholesale scenario. So the hurdle is you have to get your distributor. And now I can, and again, some states you can, some states you can't. I can go talk to a major chain retailer, potentially get authorization for that retailer, and then I go to my distributor and say, hey, guess what? We just got approval for XYZ retailer. You start delivering to them, the first of the month. Or we go in as a collective group, or the distributor says, hey, I can get you into these retailers. So that distributor is key. You talk about a partnership. You have to get a distributor that truly believes in our brand. And our first distributor in Louisiana is JuJu Wines, and they're a smaller house. But this gentleman was so excited about getting the product. He knew the story about Blaine Kern. He loved the concept. He didn't have a canned because he does everything in bottles, but he understood the marketplace, understood the uniqueness of what we had. And he said, man, I'm going to be so happy to represent you. And literally when the truck arrived at his dock, he sends me a text. He said, we got all the product. We're good to go. So it was, it's just refreshing to work with a partner that's really excited about it.
So I think that's pretty interesting. You're able to work with, I would say that Visa Wines, maybe they're more like boutique-y, as opposed to a national player. So I think what's unique about this is you can work with a boutique distributor, or you could go to a large regional or maybe even a national distributor. There are choices is kind of the point I'm making, if you'd agree.
Yeah, I would agree. And while you can go with a large distributor and get an incredible footprint right away, sometimes the challenges in there, and you have to be realistic, is how much time and energy are they going to put on our little startup brand versus a brand that, makes them millions and tens of millions of dollars in one marketplace. And I understand that. And so this relationship makes sense. Now, our distributor, which we're finalizing in Missouri, they are a larger house. However, they also understand and appreciate the importance of Mardi Gras as a kickoff time frame. But they also appreciate and really think that it's a cool product. So they are much larger as well. So I really think it's more about the relationship with that distributor. And as long as they find an understanding and what's unique about the product, then they're going to concentrate on it.
Well, I think what's pretty interesting about this is you had mentioned a little while ago, you don't take yourselves too seriously. So That's probably going to differentiate you right off the beginning. The other thing is your graphics, the product itself, but even more importantly, I think about your experience and the companies you work for, Red Bull, Glasso, House of Blues. You didn't take yourself too seriously either. So it's almost like you're doing version 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. And I think that's very good.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I mean, listen, you and I work together at Coca-Cola, and God bless anybody that wants to go to Coke for 20 or 30 years. But that large corporate atmosphere probably is not really to my overall personal DNA, who I am. And so, the brands that I've worked on have been fun. We have had brand platforms that make us fun for a reason, and that just really is more part of my personality. So I've been very blessed and fortunate to land with companies that fit my personality.
Yeah, and you've got this machine going now. You've finally got some distribution. What type of plans would you put in place for scaling and adding personnel? And what do you think that looks like coming up here the next 6 months, a year?
Well, like any startup brand, working capital is always paramount to success. And so, you have to have enough working capital to keep all those engines running. The alcoholic business is a little bit different because you do sell to that distributor. Like I said, we're looking at the first kickoff, here, this Mardi Gras, which is kind of fun because you don't really, your typical volume in the beverage industry doesn't start in March. Well, in our case, it is starting in March just because of the timing for Mardi Gras. But this is a product that, it's perfect timing as we roll into spring and summer because it's very refreshing. You can have this at the backyard barbecue. You can have it out on your boat on the water in the summer, picnics, etc. And so in terms of scalability, I mean, Kevin, the drill better than anybody. You get into a major retailer, you start having influencers and the right social execution and product being seen and likes and shares, et cetera. And that starts to, build out buzz to grow in the markets that we get into and then go into larger markets. So really, now at this point, we're talking to some, other major retail chains. And so once you have that distribution and get some buzz around some major retailers, then, hopefully, fingers crossed, they start putting the pedal on the gas.
Yeah, I think it's really good that you're able to draw on your experiences. There were probably a certain number of things that worked at Red Bull that you could take with you to this new business. Same thing with Glasso, same thing with House of Blues. And is there any one thing that stood out that as you got ready to launch this, It was, yeah, I did this at Glasso. I know what I did right. I know I know what I did wrong, and I'm going to change it. And I made it look like this instead. Is there any experience you're drawing on that maybe guided you with the launch of this?
Yeah, I go back to myself tasting it, and if it didn't taste, if it didn't have a good flavor to it, I probably would have been a little apprehensive. I'm just a firm believer in somebody going and actually put, liquid to lips kind of scenario. And so the on-premise is going to be a big focus. I mean, we'd even addressed long time ago, early on in my career. I only know this because they just celebrated their 25th anniversaries. 25 years ago, I was at Jim Beam when it was called Jim Beam Brands. And we always had an on-premise focus for launching products because people are a little more liberal to say, yeah, I'll try that, $10, $15 martini versus going into a grocery store and grabbing that, $50 bottle of vodka to make cocktails at home. So if they can try it once, then they're in an on-premise, and either they hopefully they love the product and they go from there. So, but that goes back to what I had done at Red Bull and Vitamin Water is the sampling. If you can get somebody to try your product and they fall in love with it. Now, of course, when I was at Red Bull, and I'm going to be dating myself, but social media is not as old as you think it is, people. Social media did not exist. Facebook was not a thing in 2001 when I started at Red Bull.
You are dating yourself.
I know I am. So,
I have a rule on here. We really don't want to date ourselves. And I made the mistake of dating Kevin. I said 30 years.
Yeah. You did. Thanks, Tony.
I did.
But if you think about this, is that, Red Bull became a gigantic brand way before social media was invented. If social media had been around, I mean, Red Bull would have escalated to, billions, much faster. But now it's so important of what influencers are. You don't always need to have that massive Hollywood professional athlete celebrity versus that YouTuber that has probably more followers than some big NFL, NBA persona. And that's just the reality. So that there's influencers that are totally different. You get your product into the right influencer on a social capacity, you literally just explode. So that's one differentiation. But the fundamental basis of seeding that product to that influencer, having somebody taste it is still there. It's just kind of done, I don't want to say a 180, but at least a 90-degree turn. And this is how it happens now.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, John. If you think about, and this dating both of us, we go back to our days at Coke, there are certain things you knew you had to check the box off on. And it could be you've got to have some TV at some point. You've got to run different spots with radio stations. It was just, you had the box and you checked it. But you fast forward to where we are now, because where social media is now, it's completely changed the game in a many times less expensive format. And in today's environment, you would think cost of everything are going up, aluminum cans, because of supply chain shortages. But social media, you could actually launch a brand and do it fairly successfully with kind of a low end budget if you get the right people. Would you agree?
Yes and no. And I would say yes in the fact that you're absolutely right. You can have a lesser budget to launch things online, start getting followers, etc. As soon as you go to an influencer, I mean, literally back when I was at Red Bull or Glasso, you thought that case of product was, $1,000, $5,000 worth because these influencers were so appreciated that you hooked them up with some free product. Now influencers are monetizing their value. And so that influencer that everybody on this call has never heard of, they will ask you for $5,000 or $10,000 just to do one post. So probably not that big NBA type of multi-million-dollar contract, but they are monetizing things. But yeah, absolutely. It's you can potentially have a more economical execution.
Yeah. So Tony, think about this. This is why we have John on, because he's given you nuggets of information that I think a lot of people may not have thought through or weren't even aware of. And it's just very good because he can just draw on all these different experiences of what he's done and what's been effective and what hasn't. I think it's great.
Well, and I just want to ask, though, because, and I agree completely what you're saying, Kevin, you mentioned working capital is paramount, and then you kind of touched on you at some point, you do want to bring on an influencer. In this case, it would make sense, right? At Mardi Gras, it's fun. You might have some people, posting things on TikTok or wherever, and, it could just kind of go viral, and, you kind of pay for that. But in general, can you give us some ideas around what someone should try to budget? You did mention work. I know that's like, I don't want you to give away your trade secrets or anything like that, but can you even ballpark us a little bit here?
Yeah. Every startup beverage company will say they're raising $5 million. I've never met one startup beverage that doesn't throw out 5 million as a number. Why? Yeah. I don't know. But realistically, you need 7 figures just to enter a conversation. It's just, there's, Kevin touched on it between, supply chain and samples and making the juice, so to speak, and getting product samples out there, doing a little bit of a push. There's a lot of entrepreneurs that will do, blood and sweat equity to get started, but eventually you need those numbers. And in my experience, those potential investors out there, and especially when you're doing an angel and you've got 0 sales. So anybody can put together.
You're pre-rev.
Yeah. Anybody can put together a financial deck. Here's what we want to do in, our first 5 years. It's like, okay, great. But what they will invest on, in my experience, is the product. And when I mean the product, it's the story, it's the taste of the product, the concept itself. And when I also say that also includes the category. So they'll analyze the category. Does it make sense to them? The second thing they invest in is the team that's been assembled.
Yes. I was just going to say 100%. They are looking at you. They know you're an expert. They looked at your track record, and that's got to give them some level of comfort when you do put together financial projections, that you're not just, being Pollyanna. You can actually give them some real life projections and, worst case scenarios.
Well, and I appreciate that, because that's, hopefully the background does help some of that thinking for those investors. But I've been approached by some products that I think are pretty interesting, but the team that's assembled, or maybe the 2 founders, they've never worked in consumer packaged goods, or they've never worked in beverage before. And I'm blatantly honest in saying, you need to have a board of advisors or somebody that has a resume like mine. And I'm not trying to be arrogant or pound my chest at all, but those investors want to know who's guiding these 2 people that have never worked in the space before. And so you have to assemble a team of experts around you and maybe pay them some equity and those kinds of things, just so those investors understand that their money is being spent properly by a group of people that understand the space.
Yeah. And, Tony, I want to add to this about John. I think what sets him apart is he's very, very realistic, because both he and I could build a $5 billion or $5 million investment plan, and it would look great. And it's well written, makes sense. I got it. But he also understands the struggles that it takes for startups. And so that's where the voice of reason comes in, saying, if we did X, we could make Y. If we did. So he gets it. And that's what sets him apart.
Obviously, I'm a talent guy. I'm a headhunter. Everyone knows that. This is my favorite industry to work in. So, as we kind of wrap up here, John, we can always have a follow-on later in the year to kind of see how the launch has gone in your 2 markets, and we can just kind of do a recap at some point. But for a new brand starting off, particularly in beverage, can you think of the first 2 or 3 most critical hires you would imagine a beverage brand would need?
Well, selfishly, from my marketing background, I'm going to say a marketer, but I'm going to back up for a second. So let's make the assumption that you're holding a live product in your hand. So the chemistry, the innovation, the creation is actually in your hand. The reality is you need a solid sales and distribution professional. The people that I know, the people that I've worked with in the past, their contact list is impressive. And so if you are going to use a distributor, they have distributor contacts. If you don't need to use a distributor, they're going to have retail contacts, because as much as the online world, the sending things direct via Amazon, etc., is growing, you'll notice that there's still plenty of brick and mortar grocery stores, convenience stores, etc. out there. And so, and especially in the beverage industry, people get so enamored by Amazon, and you pick up a 6-pack of anything, it's heavy. It's expensive to ship that. I don't care where you go, it's expensive versus, a light t-shirt or something that you might order. And so the sales and distribution person is probably the most critical person, because part of it is your first quarterly update with your investors is they want to get some timelines, understanding of where you are in terms of cash flow and current sales. And so, they want to see some progress in sales and distribution. So I think that's actually the, critical first hire. Then in terms of a marketing side of things is, I said it kind of, as a joke, but it is true. Your best sales and marketing, or your best sales and distribution person can get the product in the stores. But if you can't pull it off the shelf because nobody knows the brand, it doesn't matter how good your sales and distribution person is. So you have to have those two types of things kind of in tandem. And I go back, part of the reason why Red Bull was so successful, because it poured a massive amount of execution and marketing first, way before it ever started selling the product. Build the demand, the interest, the intrigue about the product, and have people begging to understand where they can find it.
Great advice. And I totally agree, John, because the other thing too, when you have that investor meeting, if they start peeling back the onion a little bit, the question becomes, wait a minute, we're only in 10% of the market. If we got to 90%, just think how much money we would make. Yeah. But it's not that easy.
Yeah, in our business, it's called ACV, and to get that all commodity volume to go to that 10%, the 20%, and sometimes as a startup, you hope to be sold as a company at 30 or 40% ACV. I think only Coke, Pepsi, and Heineken are probably at 100% ACV. Well, maybe Red Bull now as well. But the math makes sense. And if you're a CPA, you could probably figure that out. But to your point, it's not always that easy. You've got one retailer that takes it, and then the next retailer goes, I'll think about it. I'm not really sure. And if that's a large retailer with thousands of doors, you're not at 100 or 90.
Very true. Very true. Yeah, and if it was that easy, we'd have a lot more beverage companies out there running around being successful.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, when it takes at least 7 figures to do something right, at some point, that really separates the men from the boys. You can play around all you want with formulations in your kitchen, but at some point, if you really want to get that product out, you're going to have to come up with those investors. John, Kevin, I think this has been a great introduction to JuJu Brands, and I think a nice introduction to you, Kevin. This is going to be, hopefully one of many podcasts we'll do this year. And John, I'm going to start checking my front porch for some cans of wine. I mean, I should have maybe said that offline, but guess what?
Well, I think we can take care of it.
Pop, fizz. Let's get this thing going.
I think I can take care of that for you.
Let's get that party started. Now, of course, we're in Georgia, so maybe that's not going to work. But in all seriousness, this has been a great deep dive. And what I want folks to do, if you're listening to this, or if you're watching this because you saw it on LinkedIn, I want you to share it in your network so you can kind of get that viral aspect going for this brand. I think it'd be kind of fun to see what could happen there. And particularly if you're in those markets, take some pictures and let's post it back on LinkedIn. And if you're just listening on iTunes or Spotify, that'd be great. We'd love a rating. We're trying to increase the influence of these brands out in the marketplace. So Kevin and John, thank you both so much for being here today.
Thank you, Tony.
I appreciate it. If your audience can go to MrMardiGrasWines.com and find out what we're all about, and find us on Facebook and Instagram as well.
You know what? I should have asked you for that. So yeah, so the e-com, I totally dropped the ball. It's going to happen at some point during the podcast. I stick my foot in my mouth. So it happened at the 40-minute mark. So you're fortunate. So it's MrMardiGras.com. Is that
MrMardiGrasWines.com?
MrMardiGrasWines.com. And then where are you on Facebook?
Under Mr. Mardi Gras Wines on both of them. Both
Great.
Facebook and Instagram.
Great. All right, guys, let's get out there and check this brand out. And we wish you much success launching it. It's coming up here on Fat Tuesday.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
All right, guys.
Best of luck, John. Take care.
Best of luck.